stepping back and stroking two. Bogdanovich thinking about a three. There it is. Yes!
See it again. No double team help, and Embiid takes it right to the rack.
Embiid, step back, jumper. You bet. There he is again. The Euro step there. Embiid getting Gobert to fight. Nice feed to Embiid.
Welcome to a new episode of The Feed to Embiid. It is Saturday, March 26th, about 2:30 in the afternoon. I have my pal Thiago Scabbia, a great writer, colleague of mine from the Painted Lines, as you know. Thiago, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm going to ask you the question because I know there's a big game tonight, a non-Sixers game tonight that you're going to be very much glued into. So who wins that matchup tonight?
I think I'm taking Houston to win that matchup.
Wow.
I think I'm taking them to win pretty handily.
Whew, interesting. Nova's
you?
I haven't watched much of Houston to know any better, but Nova's starting to get that feel of that team that, you know, may have another run left in them for another championship. They don't have the same scoring that they had in the past for those teams, but they got a little bit of that feel going on. So I'll take Nova for sure.
You might be a population by yourself. Houston as the 5 seed is favored, by the way.
Yeah, are they favored?
Yeah, although it's dropped a little bit. It was from 3, now it's 2.5. But still, when you're the 5 seed and you're playing the 2 seed, and when you're favored, probably shows that maybe you were underseeded quite a bit.
Yeah, they had their best player got hurt during the year, so
yeah,
imagine what it would be like. Interesting, very interesting. Good stuff.
Yeah. But we don't talk about Houston here. We talk about the NBA team in Philadelphia. The Sixers are 3-0 this week. They dropped a game to the shorthanded Raptors on Sunday, and then they come back. They beat the Heat without not without Butler. They had definitely had Butler.
Yeah,
still lost.
Yeah.
They had the Sixers were without Harden and Embiid. They beat the Lakers without LeBron and AD on Wednesday. Yesterday they smoked the Clippers in a game where the Clippers were really never in it. They jumped out to a quick 5-0 lead, and then after that it was all Sixers throughout the remaining 43 minutes of play. Thiago, so where do you think this team stands right now? Like, if you had to place them in the East, where would you place them?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question because you can look at the standings and think, well, Brooklyn not a threat, Milwaukee not the same. But to me, when you watch those two teams very closely, particularly Milwaukee and Brooklyn, I myself see the Sixers one step below those two teams. I don't really put much emphasis on Miami. I know some folks love that culture. I mean, there's more enough evidence to suggest that bubble run was just a bubble run, and this team is not really a title level contender, although they are the number 1 seed in the East. But to me, I think, Brooklyn, first off, that game that they had in Philadelphia, which, there was a lot of outside stuff going on, and I think that played into the Sixers' performance a little bit. But that was a scary, scary, scary output that we saw from Brooklyn in that matchup with the Sixers. And I think, getting KD fully healthy, Kyrie playing the way that he is, and now they've been able to add Drummond and Curry, right? And we don't even know what the situation with Ben. Even assuming that Ben doesn't play, those two guys really help Brooklyn really elevate them back to, I think, a top contending team. And I spent some time watching Milwaukee this week. They're playing phenomenal offensive basketball, man. Like, they have really migrated their offense outside of just, Giannis isolation. Giroux has been absolutely phenomenal for that team, doing a lot more off-the-ball stuff with Giannis. They mix and match different lineup combinations, which should be very, very hard to match up against. They can go big, they can go small. They have shooters all over the court. So I see the Sixers a little bit below those two teams, but that does not mean that, to me, they're going to be out by any. I mean, the Sixers can definitely hang on with those teams in a 7-game series, no questions asked.
Yeah. So where do you put Boston in the mix?
So Boston, I know folks are very high on Boston, and there's obviously reasons to be high on Boston. I think the numbers over the last 2 months, month and a half, suggest a elite team on both ends of the court. They're a tough matchup for the Sixers offensively because they have wing players, and we all watch the Sixers closely enough to know that they don't have a lot of athleticism, a lot of defensive-oriented players on the perimeter outside of 1 or 2 players. So that creates a very difficult matchup for the Sixers. But to me, when I watch Sixers versus Boston historically, they've never really had an answer for Embiid since Embiid has taken a step up in his career. Obviously, when Embiid came in, Horford was a big pain point for him, but I just don't see it. I don't see it them being able to handle Embiid. I see guys getting in foul trouble. And once you put Robert Williams or Al in foul trouble, their defensive scheme just takes a massive hit. So I still need to see it. I know that was that game they played early in the year where they kind of whooped the Sixers, but that was what Harden had just kind of joined. They were shorthanded. I need to see it in 7-game series. I'm fairly confident Sixers can win in 6 against Boston. I don't know, but what do you think?
I think right now, I would put the tiers that I would probably go. Milwaukee, I'll give them the edge because they're the defending Eastern Conference champion, and the defending NBA champion for that matter. I would go Boston next because it isn't that Boston's record frightens me or should frighten anybody. It's that their point differential is obscene. They have the best point differential in the Eastern Conference. I think they have the second best point differential in the entire NBA. They do. So they are bludgeoning teams. They're not winning. They are bludgeoning teams repeatedly over this stretch where they've won like a gazillion games out of a gazillion plus 2.
Yep.
And so I think they're real. I think they figured some things out. They have as much shot creation as you could ask for out of players that are perfectly sized. That they're hard to defend. Yeah. Their defensive versatility is insane. I would pick them to be number 2. I think the Sixers have earned the right to be number 3, just because. I mean, they have James Harden. Obviously, he's an upgrade over Ben Simmons net overall. But also like Embiid's the MVP, I think, and I think they've held enough water this year amidst a lot of turmoil to earn that right to be like, hey, we've proven that we can do things, and I think Brooklyn, with the uncertainty around Simmons and Kyrie being able to play, like if he can't play in Toronto and they lose, they're in a situation where they have to win 1 game or go home. So I mean, there's a scenario where Brooklyn doesn't even get to the playoffs.
That's very true. But here's where I ultimately land on, right? So you got Philly, Brooklyn, Milwaukee, and Boston. If you're to rank the top 6 players of those teams, do you even have a Boston player in the top 6?
So it was Philly.
So take the 14 you just talked about.
Right? Wait. It's Brooklyn, Philly, Boston,
and Milwaukee.
So it's Embiid, it's Giannis, Durant, obviously, yeah.
Harden. Still or no? You're not even. Wow.
I don't know that I will. I don't know that I'd put him in front of Tatum.
Interesting.
Would you?
I still would. I just think that Harden's shot creation, passing is. I mean, we've seen what he's done to the Sixers offense, specifically the starting lineup.
I'll put it this way. I think Harden's downside is a lot more volatile than Tatum's downside.
Yes, I agree.
So I'll give Tatum the nod very slightly.
Okay.
I don't feel good about giving him the nod, but I think I would give it to him just very, very minimally because he's been great for a longer stretch of this season than Harden has.
Sure.
So I'll give him that, and then Harden's 5th, and then Kyrie is probably 6th.
So you got 2 Brooklyn, a Milwaukee, maybe 2 Sixers, maybe like a Boston player there. That's where I still struggle with Boston. I get it. I get the numbers. I get the players. I get the matchup. But there's still that top level talent that I still don't see in Boston. Maybe this is Tatum's turn to finally prove to the world that what many people have said about him. Maybe this is his turn. We'll see. But I don't know.
Let me ask you this. How would you rank the head coaches?
Oh.
I would go. So I'd probably go. Ooh, this is hard.
So I'll
give the respect to Ime Udoka.
Wow.
As number one.
Interesting.
Number two.
With no track record of anything.
Well, I'll probably get bitten in the ass for that. But Ime Udoka, because I think what he's done is more impressive than what Budenholzer is. Like, Budenholzer was literally a Kevin Durant foot in the line away from being fired. So, I mean, Udoka, I'll go Bud. I'll go Doc. I'll go Nash.
Wow. I actually much higher on Nash than people are. I do like watching Brooklyn play. They do some interesting things. Obviously, he's got some phenomenal talent around him. I would actually put Doc number 2 in that group, to be perfectly honest.
Really?
I'm not a Doc guy. Yeah, I'm not a Doc guy at all. As you know.
Believe me, I know.
Trust me. But I think, and he's got a horrific track record in the playoffs outside of that, which should definitely factor in. But I think if he just stays out of the way in the postseason and doesn't make any outrageous lineup decisions or in-game decisions, the Sixers should be fine, even with the kind of personnel that they have, because the firepower offensively can be so potent. So I still believe that he's going to look at his lineup and say, listen, give Embiid the ball, give Harden the ball, don't get cute, and go from there. So from that alone deserves a bump up in the rankings.
What if – okay, fair. I think the Doc playoff thing is a little bit like he's had some 3-1 series leads that were blown, sure. He's also had series where like his best players were like smitten with injuries. Those are separate series, but I think maybe his story plays out a little differently if those guys don't get hurt. But I think the more concerning undertone for Philly is that a lot of the issues that he ran into in LA, issues that his own former players had like kind of like made shots at him about after last year, they've moved with him to Philly too. Like he hasn't learned. I don't think he's learned all that much. But it's hard to believe that you're higher on Doc, because I would never have guessed that you would have been higher on Doc than me, because I'm not really all that public in my criticism of Doc. I do it in writing in my game stories, but yeah, wow. It's hard.
I mean, in that group of coaches, like I would put Spo above all these guys in a heartbeat, but he's not part of that group. There's a bunch of other coaches. Nick Nurse, I would put Nick Nurse way ahead of Doc. So, yeah. But in that small, concentrated group of coaches, he's not that far off.
Yeah. So let's go over to speaking of lineup things. DeAndre Jordan has been an experience. It has been ruthless, I think, is the way to describe it. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's been horrendous watching DeAndre Jordan play. I mean, very little good has come from it. I think last night I noticed this more than anything. The effort is very disappointing. I think he doesn't really like go all out to make contests at the rim. Like he may like raise his arm to like get a hand in the guy's face, but he's not leaving the ground. You don't see him ever really jump unless he's jumping for a lob at the rim, and so he doesn't really like doesn't really go all out to make contests. Last night there were loose balls that he was right in front of that he didn't go for. He kind of just like I think I saw him try to kick one. So that
wrong sport, DeAndre.
Yeah, Yeah, it's been not a good existence for DeAndre Jordan. But let's look at some of the numbers here with the Sixers. The opposition is scoring 100 points per half court play. So per 100 half court plays, opposition is scoring 100 points. So 1.0 point. That's 13th in the NBA. 13 percentile in the NBA. So not great. They're either essentially on average, they're either scoring a bucket or they're getting fouled, and that's on average the likelihood that they're going to be scoring a point. And I think another thing is like, yes, he kind of just he's a very good defensive rebounder. I think he will vacuum up all the rebounds near where in his vicinity, but I still am not convinced that like there are rebounds that he doesn't get to that he should. Last night, because of effort, Isaiah Hartenstein caught an air ball from Luke Kennard and then put it back up and in. Like he caught it under the basket because Jordan did not box him out. Yeah. So I think effort's a problem. I also think that the context in which the opposition is scoring with Jordan on the court is troublesome. On the court, opponents are shooting 76.1% at the rim with Jordan on the floor.
76.
Yeah. So it's 76.1% again when Jordan is on the floor.
What's their the net rating when he's on the floor? At some point, it was like a plus 40. Like
we'll get there. The scary part is this: opponents actually aren't even taking all of that many shots at the rim with him. Yeah. They're actually taking more threes with him on the court. They're taking 37% of the shot distribution with Jordan on the court is threes.
Which makes sense because you're like, the guy doesn't move. He just stands there. So
yeah, and he doesn't move out. But also I think it's more along the lines of like we don't have dynamic shot creation in the units that he's playing in. Like the opponents are thinking, hey, he's coming in when our second unit's in.
Yeah.
We don't have our best shot creators are resting right now.
Yeah. Sure.
Let's let so they're going to take more threes because they don't have guys that are as necessarily as crafty or dynamic. But I do think it makes sense that because he's anchored to the rim, in theory, he's not guarding in space because that would be disastrous. They're taking more threes because they're getting open looks.
Yeah.
But still, 76% of the opponents shooting 76% when Jordan at the rim when Jordan's on the floor. That's unacceptable.
Yep.
And then if we look at the net rating, I'm trying to find the net rating here. With Jordan on the floor, the Sixers are averaging
defensively.
No, they're scoring 116.9 points per 100 on offense with him on the floor. Okay. Probably because he's playing next to like Maxey and there are some good peripheral players that he's with, but they're giving up 117 points per 100 with him on the floor. That's 14th percentile. So they're scoring fine, but they're giving up more than what they score. So it's what we're seeing here, the DeAndre Jordan experience. He doesn't make good contests at the rim. They're shooting at everything they want at the rim. He doesn't really fight for loose balls. He doesn't get those very often. He will suck up the rebounds though.
Yep.
His touch around the rim is hilarious.
Oh, I saw that yesterday. I actually tweeted it. I looked it up. Out of 50 players, he's got 50 centers or 50 players that finish around the rim. He's got the worst field goal percentage.
Yeah.
Which is outrageous.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, just touch the ball and dunk, man.
and here's the thing. It isn't that he's posting up and nor that he's just missing hook shots or he's like going up against multiple guys trying to out of the dunker spot. He's trying to catch lobs. They're throwing him lobs. He's missing the lobs or he's getting dunks and he's botching dunks.
So let me ask you a question because we cover the numbers. It's bad all around, even though offensively it's okay. But when you play alongside Harden, you just usually stand there and it's going to be okay. What do you think Doc once out of that backup. It's just rebounding and like leadership. A guy who doesn't do any stupid fouls. Like, what do you think he's looking for out of that?
Somebody who was alive in the 1980s, probably.
A friend of his that he can talk to at night and his insecurities or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think when you ask Doc that question, you kind of get like oh, he's been great, that kind of thing. I think the saving grace that only Doc really knows about, and that would kind of validate that conversation, is that schematically he's the only one who knows where Jordan should be in position in the scheme, because he's the only one because Doc knows the scheme that he's running. I would venture to say the media doesn't really know the specifics or like the finer details of his defensive schemes or what makes them any different than the oppositions. So, I think maybe Doc's advantage is to say like, and his positioning is in accordance with my scheme, which could be true. But I also know that the eye test says that it's a treacherous experience, and that last night the Sixers were up 20 in the first quarter, or whatever it was. As soon as they put Jordan in, the Clippers cut that lead to 10.
Well, here's what I lose it with Doc, because you've had 2 years to bring up Paul Reed in your scheme. 2 years. So you punted that opportunity. And then when you played the kid Bassi early in the year, like, he flashed a lot of potential. And I know, like, it's a rookie, but you had a whole year to bring up this kid on your scheme. So I'm not saying you should anchor, like, all your hopes on Bassi and Reed, because there is value to playing veterans in the playoffs. I do believe that. You can't just throw rookies out there and expect them to be okay. But specifically with Paul Reed, 2 years, man. And when you saw Paul Reed last night, like, you see some of the stuff that you talked about that Jordan does not bring, but Paul Reed can. So that athleticism, like, he's active on defense. He's able to deflect balls. He can somewhat finish around the rim. I think Bassi's better at that than Reed. And that's something they missed with Drummond. Like, Drummond was a phenomenal pick and roll defender. Like, he was really, really good. He deflected a lot of balls, a lot of lobs. He was very active. So I don't see Jordan bringing any of those elements to the postseason, and that is very concerning. Like, that is extremely concerning, because you're talking about critical minutes in 4 or 5 minute stretches here that could completely swing the game. We saw that against Toronto a few years ago. We saw those Monroe minutes be absolutely catastrophic. Now, I hope that with Harden on the court, the Sixers can kind of mitigate some of that offensively. But it's concerning, man. It's absolutely concerning.
I think the biggest thing in the playoffs that really matters is defending in space. That's like right. The thing that's going to be really important, because you play the Nets, you play the Celtics, you play any of those teams.
They all have them. They all have guys like that.
They have but they have wings and guards who, if you're switching, because Harden does like to switch schemes, if you're switching in the minutes that Jordan's on the floor and he's forced to guard in space or give up open threes, they're going to pick you apart in those minutes. And you could very easily, very easily lose a series in those minutes. So if he's playing 10 minutes a game, you could easily get outscored 10 plus points in those 10 minutes that he's playing. And then that's your entire game. And if you lose a series 7 games, congrats, you lost the series because you played DeAndre Jordan.
We saw that with Kawhi. Kawhi be on the court with Monroe, and it was like it was every single time until.
But here's the difference, though. At least Brett exhausted all of their options. There was nothing left to try. Like Bolden was unplayable because he fouled everything he touched. Amir Johnson had nothing left, and it was kind of like, well, Boban could not move in space. Yeah. So what else were you left with? That was what you had to do. In this case, Doc is foregoing the opportunity to test out younger legs for the sake of playing a guy who is clearly out of his league right now.
Absolutely.
Speaking of shot creation, where do you fall in the Miami Heat?
In terms of the contender, or like,
yeah,
I don't buy it, man. I'm sorry.
I don't buy him either, even a little bit.
When your lead ball handler, doesn't really do a lot of stuff on the perimeter. We saw that with Ben here in Philly. He draws a ton of foul. He gets to the line, but I just don't think that's sustainable for a postseason. I know Kyle Lowry, and I haven't really watched Kyle Lowry much closer this year. Perhaps you have a better take on what Lowry looks like this year. I know he was playing really well last year and the year before that. But.
I thought he's been kind of passive. I think you could make a good argument that he is saving up for the playoffs, which could be the case. And if it is, then, it's a new element. I also don't think that you're going to be getting anywhere special with Kyle Lowry as your number one shot creator. And I know like Raptors and Heat fans would say like, well, he won the championship and he had 29 points. Okay, but do they win the championship without Kawhi Leonard? No.
Yeah, no.
No, they don't.
And you can tell like how they struggle with shot creation because when you watch the Heat, they do a ton of like off-ball movement. They try to generate shots at a very unique level than most teams. And that's got to be exhausting for a 7-game series. Like you're always trying to like, dribble handoffs here and stuff that we saw a lot with the Sixers when Brett was here with JJ Redick and Ben running point guard. You have to manufacture a lot of looks. And with the Heat, when you watch the Heat, they just have to manufacture a lot of stuff. And I think that just over time, it just becomes too much for you in a 7-game series. So I don't fear them at all. I would love to play them in the playoffs, to be honest with you.
I wouldn't love that because I don't feel like going 7 rounds against Heat Twitter. But, I would. Well, I shouldn't say that because like I think I'm fairly neutral. But I mean, I know that they'll be all over me, like no matter what.
Well, you've got. I thought you meant the defenses. I thought you guys.
I thought I did, but I still get roasted. They don't forget. They're like cockroaches. They don't forget. But like when it comes to and they can say like, well, Jimmy Butler and this and that like Heat culture is not a solution for shot creation issues. What Jimmy Butler did 5 years ago is not a solution for today's shot creation issues. Their championships with LeBron James in the court do not have anything to do with today's shot creation issues. You can't just live in the past and say that we won 3 championships in the last 15 years. We're fine. Like that's not how that works. In today's game, they can run split actions for Duncan Robinson all they want and try to diversify their offensive game all they want. The bottom line is that with Tyler Hero on the floor, he's probably the best shot creator.
And defensively, it's a disaster. We saw that game.
We got bullied by the Sixers.
Yeah, that was
and I don't know that you can trust him as your number one shot creator. Like a 6-man. I don't know that you can do that. I also don't. I'd be concerned. He's in a switch scheme because again, if you're going to run different actions for Duncan Robinson to curl around screens, defenses are just going to switch that. And then you can get the shot off that you can get off against weaker teams that are out of the playoffs and they're not fighting through every screen that they will be in a series. So I have
some interesting stuff with Duncan. Like he'll come off a screen and then like little dump off pass to dive in like bam. So they have ways of like kind of playing off how defenses like attack those actions. But like you said, it's just manufactured stuff. You get hit with it once, twice, then you flip your scheme and you're making your adjustment, and now you've got them under control. I would love to take down the Heat and have the Jimmy Butler blow up and be the reason why.
No comment. I wish them all the best. Let's go over to Tyrese Maxey because I think his emergence has changed the world for the Sixers. People, you could speak on hyperbole a lot. You could say, if it weren't for this guy, this story is the biggest story in the entire season. Without Tyrese Maxey's growth, I'm not convinced that they do the Harden trade this trade deadline, and rather they wait until the summer to do it.
Really?
But let's say they allow that. Let's say they do that and allow that to happen. Kyrie comes back. Maybe Harden doesn't want out.
Yeah,
that could absolutely have changed the entire trajectory of their whole season. Tyrese Maxey's emergence. And what he's doing as the third guy is very real to me because of the way in which he's doing it. Like, not only does he has a penchant for making difficult shots, for sure. And, he can do he manipulates the game with his speed and can get up and down the court in a blur. But his shot distribution, I think, is really encouraging in that if he catches the ball on the wing or in the corners, he's registering where the defense is, and he's reading it from there and just going. Like if he's wide open for a three, he's taking it out the catch, and he's getting really comfortable with that.
Yeah.
If it's a heavy closeout, he waits for them to get there, and then he's bursting around them and he's attacking and he's allowing them to chase him off the line, but he's using that to his advantage. And he's getting to the rim. His finishing around the rim has not really vacillated. He'll have a game here or there where he can't get the crazy ones to fall like he usually does. But in large part, the play at the rim has allowed him to really stay afloat at times when his jumper maybe wasn't there this season. And his three has finally caught up. He's punishing unders now on the screens. Everything he's doing suggests that he's a legitimate number three. And it isn't even like he's making plays on an incredibly high volume. It's that his volume has risen, and so has his accuracy, so has his efficiency. He's getting to the line a ton more now. I could not be more impressed with what he's doing, and I judging by what I think his work ethic is based on what he's done so far in his growth, who's to say in 2 years from now he can't be a plus defender who is one of the best guards in the league.
Yeah, he's been by far the biggest beneficiary from Harden. I mean, just from a play style, which speaks volumes to the player, because if you look at like Tyrese's, like he's been asked to do a lot in a very short amount of time with the Sixers and just being 20, 21 years old. And he's constantly adapted around Embiid and now adapted around Harden and, playing off Harden's gravity, attacking those driving lanes when Harden gets trapped, just attacking the rim. Extremely impressive. I think he absolutely elevates when we talk about the Sixers being a championship contender this year. I think Maxey's absolutely the X factor. I don't see Harris being the X factor. I think
I don't think so.
And I'm not as critical as I think Harris has been better than a lot of people have kind of.
Oh yeah, he's way better, but I still think that you just can't trust him to be.
No, you can, and you can start to see reasons why you can trust Maxey.
Yeah.
I will say a couple of things, like on the finishing around the rim. One of the things I was watching very closely last night. So he still got that one speed to the rim, power, speed floater. And I hope playing alongside Harden and watching Harden maneuver as a ball handler, he can start developing some counters, right? So you're going to speed to the rim. There's two 7-footers, just 7-footer that are waiting for you there. Pivot, slow, try to freeze the defender in space, and then attack in a different way. I hope you start developing that, because at times he get a little bit wild in his ability. He's very, very confident in that one-hand, underhand floater. But sometimes it's not going to happen, man. You're just not big enough. You're not tall enough. But I think he'll develop that over time. And I think defensively, so really where I go with Maxey's defensive, because I'm very confident in his offensive game. Like, I believe that, fourth quarter, if you need a guy to take a shot, he'll take it and he will make it. Defensively is where he's got to survive. And that, to me, still oscillates a lot with Maxey. So game like last night, I thought he was phenomenal. I thought he stayed connected through screens. He competed. He was very under control defensively. But then I was watching the game against Dallas, and like the ball gets swung out to Josh Green, like low volume, 3-point shooter, average shooter. Nobody shouldn't even be on a scouting report. And here comes Maxey, like closing out, like it's Klay Thompson 2.0. And I'm like, these are the things that you hope that he starts developing more consistently, because there's no reason why you should ever be closing out on Josh Green like it's Klay Thompson, period. And then the guy just pump fake, goes in the lane and gets an easy layup. So you hope that comes with experience, because I think those are the things that are going to really make him an all-around player. So, but like you said, the guy definitely changes the conversation from the Sixers standpoint. There's absolutely stardom when you watch him play, no questions.
So one quick note before I comment on his defense. Tyrese's 3-point shooting Pull-up threes, he's shooting 1.8 per game. He's shooting 41.2% on those. That's outstanding. Off the catch, mind you, he came into the league as more of a pull-up shooter than an off the catch guy.
Yeah,
he's shooting. Let's take a look here. 2.1 off the catch, 43.1%. So his shooting has been one of the biggest growth points that you can touch. You can see it. It's like, this is monumental. Last year he shot 29% from three. This year he's at 43%.
Do you have his corner numbers? Is it still in the 60%?
Corner three is 58%.
58. Oh, he just dipped.
Only 58%. Last year he was at 8%.
Really? 8%? Yeah. Oh, he probably took like 5 quarter threes last year or something like that.
But he took 12.
12, okay. Yeah. I mean, it's like automatic from the corner, man.
Yeah.
Like
he's quadrupled his volume from the corners, and he's that's a pretty impressive growth. His finishing at the rim, he took 118 shots at the rim last year, 58% and that's a 47 percentile. This year he's at 62% at the rim on 276. He's maintained the volume. The volume's grown actually, and the accuracy has risen too. Yeah. The craftiness is 100% there. So all the signs on offense say that he is on his way to being an all-star as one of his outcomes. Defensively, I like his low center of gravity. I think that helps him in a lot of ways get through screens, although right now he's a little bit thin, so he dies on screens a lot of the time. It's going to make the Sixers have to switch or have to play drop or have to do like hedging. But I think ultimately he'll build up body mass, and then that'll help him get through screens. I think the low center of gravity and speed, something he's going to help with. I do think that you are right. Like some of the things where he's chasing guys around on closeouts that don't garner that type of attention on closeouts is problematic, because that allows them to get you off balance and then attack closeouts. But I think one of the big developments for him is, number one, staying on the ground and not committing stupid fouls. Like, I think there's times when he'll get caught with like little ticky-tack calls against more veteran offensive players, or if he's like fighting through a screener with more experience will like wrap up his arm and then get him called for a foul on the screen, and he'll pick up some fouls that way. But I think last night he stayed on the ground against Reggie Jackson, did a pretty good job against him. Yeah. Reggie Jackson isn't the gold standard, but he's a pretty good offensive player. And I think that one of the things that off the ball he does really well, he's very good at, like, not very good, but he's getting better at reading passing lanes. He can certainly get out and cheat a couple times and hit the ball out in transition, and then create fast break opportunities from that. I think one of the things he really does very well when he anticipates a guy is stuck in the position and he has his back away from Maxey, he'll kind of sell out and go to the guy's backside and trap him and force live ball turnovers that way. Like, there are times out of the post, if there's someone at like let's say Jokic is playing out of the post and he doesn't see Maxey on his blind side, Maxey will sell out to trap him, and then he'll tip the ball away from him and then get out in transition. Yeah. Those are like cheap, easy ways to get better at defense within a season. They're risky. Like, a guy like Jokic can punish you with a backdoor cut, and he can hit that passer, or if the shooter spaces out, he can definitely hit. If he senses Maxey there, you can hit the shooter. But those are easy ways late in the shot clock to put a guy under duress and really have your impact defensively. It would be cool to see him like grow 1 or 2 inches. I don't think he will, but that would certainly make him something else. But
I think those steals, like, sorry to interrupt you, but like, if he gets more active defensively, steals deflection, like that's his path defensively, man. Like, you don't have to be like a perfect defender, but like you said, play the matchups, understand who's on the court, create turnovers, and kind of just stay connected on screens. That's your path, I think, defensively, and then you're perfectly fine, because what you're bringing offensively is tremendous. So.
Yeah, I think also he's proven that he has a high motor.
Yeah,
and that motor will translate with his ability to pick guys up full court. I think right now he gives them a little bit of space when he picks up guys full court, but he's getting down in a stance full court and he's picking them up and sliding and making them change direction as they bring the ball up, which may not in the moment have much of an effect, but if you need 2 or 3 extra seconds to get the ball up the court because Maxey's kind of like in your grill, that eats time off the shot clock.
So here's the thing, though. So a couple of things. So I think one more thing on Maxey defensive is that he still gets called ball watching a lot of times. So guys will get behind him, which is a normal thing with young players in general. Second thing is, and it's a bigger question to roster, with Maxey on the court, Sixers rebounding. Like, what do you think the problem is? Like, defensive.
They just aren't disciplined. This drives me nuts. They are, over the last couple games especially, they've done a really good job at preventing the first make. Like they rotate, they are there in help positions, they deny that first shot, they're staying down, they're not committing cheap fouls. They are holding their ground on the first shot. It's that they're then losing that discipline on the box out and allowing teammates on the opposition to get in there and get the offensive rebound and get tip outs or pull it down and pull the ball out and then swing it to the point guard to reinitiate the possession. They are not good. They're not well disciplined in terms of finishing possessions off.
So the losing the guy on the rebound, because I see the same thing. Do you think it's a function of just the style of players they have on the team, or guys who don't want to get dirty, or they're just more like,
I don't think that. I just don't think. I don't know.
Because I watch a guy like Tobias Harris who averages freaking 10% rebound rate for a power forward, which is ridiculous. Like you can tell he does not want to get dirty. He does not want to get in there. Rarely do you see him get in there and really throw his elbows out and kind of get in the glass. And to me, that's a player makeup issue. So I don't know how you really fix that. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm overreading it, but I don't think the Sixers have these kind of, like you watch Toronto. These guys are like attacking the glass. These are like hounds on the glass, man. I think it's the culture of the player they have in that room. They want to attack, they want to rebound, they want to create second chances. So I don't know. Like,
I think Toronto also gets away with it a little bit because they're so athletic, they're so long that they naturally make rebounding look easy.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're rostering Seth Curry and Tyrese Maxey and Tobias Harris and other guys that are not rebounders, you have to put in that extra effort to really tighten up the possession. And I just don't think they do that consistently. I think part of it is coaching because Doc should be in their ears every time they do that and like killing them and making them feel like we have to remember the box out every time else Doc's going to be chewing us out. Yeah. I also think that they're small, so teams can push a little bit and can sort of use size against them. But I also just think that they see the shot go up. They're sometimes already thinking about getting back on offense, or they just flat out don't hold a box out. They don't. It's not part of this team's MO.
And they also give up a ton of dribble penetration, which is the point. Embiid's got to rotate and it creates that vacuum underneath the rim. So it's a mix of a lot of things.
Yeah, and by the way, I think that is something where like Jordan is not the problem, but he's not the solution. But like the reason he isn't the problem is because the reason that he has to step up to even contest guys getting to the rim is because the other four in the court are not cutting off angles and they're not sliding and they're not beating guys' spots. That's how offensive players get into the rim so frequently. So that's problematic. But let's go back to Harden a little bit. A lot of people concerned about Harden. Are you concerned? I think if I remember correctly, you were in the camp people concerned about James Harden.
Well, let's quantify concerns, right? Because my concerns are more long-term, contextually, when you talk about a contract extension. I think when you look at the player and you try to understand what that money's going to look like for the next 5 years, there are clear signs of a player slowing down. I mean, His ability, he can't turn a corner on certain guys anymore that he probably should. And you can clearly tell at the rim, even though he's finishing much better at the rim with the Sixers, but you can tell like the elevator is one level below. Before he used to get up and just jam on guys, like you can't do that anymore. So to me, the physical aspect of it is concerning for the long haul. But you're talking about asking me for this year and for next year. My concerns are Harden are almost zero. I mean, I know the shot hasn't particularly been great, but man, you watch the guy. He's just a wizard, man, like an absolute wizard. I mean, he has been all over the Sixers offense output with that starting five. His ability to create angles. I mean, the partnership that he has with Embiid, that pick and roll is unstoppable. I mean, especially the way that Embiid is diving and kind of showing himself as a rim runner. So I think from what I expected from Harden offensively in particular, it's been everything that I expected, perhaps a little bit more. I thought perhaps he would struggle a bit more early on in his timing with the Sixers. So I've been very happy with his performance offensive. I think all the numbers with that starting five suggest a potent, absolute elite group up there with Phoenix, up there with whoever you want to throw up there, that starting five. So I'm very confident that it's going to work for this year and for next year. But long term, I am concerned about that.
Yeah, that's fair. So Harden's shooting has been a little bit down, obviously, since he joined the Sixers. I think it's worth pointing out that he still has an effective field goal of 51.1, which is still in the top 60% for his for guards. His threes are 35%, not great. At the rim, he's at 63%, which is pretty good, but it's not like what he can do at his peak. I do like that he's really, for the most part, cut the mid-range game out. Like he's only taken a couple of long twos. I think he only made one or two of them. But most of it is high difficulty step back threes because he can't get around guys.
Yeah.
But last night he did a better job of getting around guys. Like he blew Robert Covington off the court. And Robert Covington is one of the most overrated defenders I think I've ever seen.
On-ball defender, absolutely.
But still, like he one swift crossover, boom, at the basket. And I thought last night the reason he got to the line so much was because he was able to manipulate the speeds a little bit. He was able to lull you a little bit on the perimeter and then get around you with quick bursts. Which was
this is like something I want to talk because I watch a lot of Atlanta because I like Trae Young a lot. Like they involve Trae Young in a ton of pick and roll. I mean, Taylor has over 14 pick and roll possessions a game, and Harden is only about 6 with the Sixers. I think there's an opportunity to get more out of Harden offensively, but I know the Sixers are anchored on Embiid and Harris and different style of play style, but just getting him in pick and rolls and having his passing create for other guys on the team, because that's what Atlanta's based on. Atlanta's an elite offensive team when Trae Young is on the court, and it's 95% driven from Trae Young pick and roll. I mean, he maneuvers guys. His passing, his vision is insane. And I see Harden as the same type of player, but he doesn't get as many opportunities with the Sixers. So doing a little bit less of, just drive up the court, pull up from whatever, and hope it goes in, and getting more involved in pick and roll action. I think the Sixers would be even more effective offensively because sometimes it just gets too stagnant. Just, 15 seconds on the clock, I'm going to just throw up a three and see if it goes in or not. So I don't know what you think about that, but I'd like to see more pick and roll stuff with him. For sure.
I agree. I think part of that is like they don't have great screeners. In like Embiid's like they're like all their screeners that are not named Embiid are pretty much one trick ponies as screeners. Like Tobias is gonna pick and pop. Thibel's gonna like do something. Who knows? Embiid can do either, but like they don't really have like a big athletic guy who can like slip screen to the basket and do different things. So I can see why they're maybe not a great pick and roll team. I still think that they don't do as much pick and roll with him as they should. But I think sort of the downside with Harden is when his legs are bad, his shot is short and he takes very difficult shots. So when he misses, the other team is getting out and they're pushing it and they're running. And that makes him a very high risk player sometimes. But it also makes him incredible when he's on a hot streak like he was last night in the first half. Ultimately, I think Maxey's emergence is something that really makes the long-term Harden risk more tolerable. Because even if Harden so I don't know if this is just me having experienced the Jimmy Butler thing a couple summers ago, but I'm still very much in the camp of let's wait and see if he does it let's wait until he is signed here long term before we start concerning ourselves with that. But I do think that hey, his legs are going to go. There's going to be a time when he can't get around anybody, unless he starts taking care of his body like Chris Paul or LeBron does. But knowing his habits, I don't know if that's never going to happen.
Yeah, people brought up the Chris Paul thing. I'm like, they're two different players, man.
Yeah. The one invests multiple millions per year to take care of himself. The other one goes to clubs every night.
It doesn't work like that.
But if Harden can reconcile that he's getting older at some point and work on shooting off the catch and relocation, and really be willing to let Maxey dial up the on-ball stuff, I think there can be a more smooth transition into his the end stage of his career.
And do you know what he's averaging spot up this year for the Sixers?
No, what is it?
1.26 points per spot up.
Which is really good.
It's phenomenal. It's one of the best marks. I mean, low volume, right? Extremely low volume, but you see the output as a spot up guy, it's there. It's just a matter of accepting it a little more.
Yeah. I still don't trust the Sixers' depth. I think the manner in which they win games is, except for last night and the Timberwolves game for the most part, and a couple of the blowouts in between. I'm still not convinced of this team because of what happened with Denver and what happened with the Nets. I think if you can get them out in transition, you can beat them pretty easily. Yeah. But the transition game will slow down the playoffs because there aren't as many live ball turnovers, there aren't as many missed shots. Right now, so if let's just say that Vegas has them as a 4 seed or as the 4th best team in the East right now. Are you higher than them on that or lower? I'm just saying hypothetically.
Higher, much higher. You're not. Wow, you're really down 6 or something.
I'll put it to you this way. I thought before the trade they were the 6th or the 7th best team.
Yeah, I agree.
I think now the backup minutes and just the inability to get back in transition are crippling issues. And I think that makes if one of those was gone, I'd say they're top 2 in the East pretty easily. But those are 2 glaring weaknesses. And as much top end talent as the Sixers have, they have some very glaring weaknesses down the roster.
They do, but so do most teams. And I think, it's still, to me, the question is, how can you stop Joel Embiid? I mean, that's really where I land with the Sixers. And I don't see many schemes out there that have been consistently holding down Embiid over the last 2 years. So that's where I completely agree with in terms of roster construction, coaching deficiencies, the gaps they have in their play style. It's crippling. I mean, absolutely crippling. But you get on a Joel Embiid run, and there's really nothing Milwaukee can do, Brooklyn can do, Boston can do to really slow him down. And I think that's, where I'm at with the Sixers. So I think in that 2-3 range is where I think that would slot him. We talked about it in the podcast. And I'm fairly confident, if they avoid that Brooklyn-Milwaukee path, they're an Eastern Conference team. Absolutely. I mean, I'll be willing to put money on that right now.
I would say right now I'm at Milwaukee, Boston, Sixers.
You're down on Brooklyn, man. I'm telling you, I don't know. Never bet against Kevin Durant, man.
Well, I think it's more so that they have too many questions.
Yeah, but some of it's going to get answered. Kyrie's going to be able to play. And I get the playing game. You might not even make it through that. But once you do, you got Kyrie and KD. And who knows, maybe even Ben.
Okay, so maybe because it's fine. Maybe I'll put this up. I put the Nets in front of the Sixers. The Net makes them the 4th best team in the East.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is this I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but I think Harden's defense,
not terrible.
What?
It's not terrible. People are
yeah, no, I don't think it's that terrible. He there, you can clearly see when he doesn't try. He doesn't get back in transition, he doesn't try. There are times when he puts a very fake closeout on guys and just we'll let them try him. But there were a couple possessions in recent games where I was like, he's trying to defend here, and like
Absolutely.
he's not doing the worst job ever.
Austin, you can tell about a minute into the game if it's going to be a James Harden game or it's not going to be a James Harden game. Like last night, a minute in, you're like, oh man, this is going to be a James Harden game. Yeah, a couple games ago, you're like, might as well watch like a rerun of some show because he's taking tonight off. And that's who he's always been in his career, man. Like,
how about the Sixers and Harden just like surviving both the off nights in LA? Just 2 nights in LA, they got through them. Didn't have to work. There was no hangover from the previous night. Look, guys, wow!
I was surprised. I'm like, this guy's in LA for a week.
Yeah.
There's no way he's playing last night. Like, he's gonna do his standard like 10 shots, kind of walk around on defense.
Yeah. All right, Thiago, where can they find you?
So Painted Lines, right? Website, right for them. We also do podcasting. I know once the Eagles draft winds down, the Sixers playoffs are going to ramp back up, and we'll be doing a lot of the live stuff on that post game in particular. So look out for that.
That's right. You can find me at the Painted Lines as well. I cover the Sixers on the beat for that website. I also cover the NBA for USA Today. You can find me there. Find us both on Twitter. Our usernames are in the tags on your screens. If you're not watching the show, you're listening to it, at NBA Krell for me, at Thiago PHL for him. As always, everybody, appreciate you tuning in. Thiago, have a good night, my friend.
You too, man. Take care.